When our MC first sees an ability, he can mimic it straight with his eyes. So without delay, let's begin this story.
The scene opens on a dark and stormy night, with heavy rain pouring down over a vast, hilly landscape. Amid the relentless downpour, two figures struggle through the rain-soaked forest, their movements urgent. The mother looks over to Sinha Hyan and urgently shouts at him to keep moving, promising they are almost there. Clutching his chest and breathing heavily, Sinha Hyan struggles but agrees with his mother's words. Suddenly, the two of them come across a fork in the road, leading in two different directions, and they stop abruptly. The mother looks terrified and exclaims that the path was created by her, insisting she never made any forks in it. Breathing heavily, Sinha Hyan calls out to his mother to decide quickly, and she urgently points right, urging him to go that way as the pursuer's sound nears. Sinha Hyan, now panting harder, struggles to breathe, and as his mother pulls his hand, she realizes he has reached his limit. Closing her eyes in regret, the mother makes a tough and heartbreaking decision that weighs heavily on her. Halting her movements, the mother turns back to Sinha Hyan and places a small sack in his hands along with a token of some kind. She reminds Sinha Hyan of his maternal grandfather, the legendary sword Saint Namgung Muriong. The mother firmly instructs Sinha Hyan to find the Namgung clan and warns him to never lose the token no matter what happens. She explains that he must show this token to the clan and tell them who he is so his grandfather can recognize him. After saying all this, the mother turns around and commands Sinha Hyan to run as fast as he can and not look back. Sinha Hyan hesitates and asks his mother what she will do, and she promises him that she will follow right after. However, Sinha Hyan remains unconvinced and doesn't move, prompting his mother to sternly ask if he is doubting her words. Being perceptive beyond his years, Sinha Hyan understands the true meaning of this farewell, and holding back his tears, he tells her he believes in her. On his mother's final and desperate command, Sinha Hyan begins running as fast as his legs can carry him. Once Sinha Hyan disappears from sight, the mother draws her sword with determination and challenges the traitors to reveal themselves. A man steps out from behind a bush, laughing arrogantly, followed by several assassins, and mockingly praises her for her cleverness. The mother, Yang Ryong, seething with anger, shouts at the man to shut his mouth. Smiling even more broadly, the man taunts her, questioning why she made things so difficult despite her severe injuries. He goes on to admit that if she hadn't taken the wrong turn, they might have completely lost track of her. Yang Ryong, glaring at him, accuses him of creating the fake path, and the man confirms it, asking her why she married into the Sin family. Furious, Yang Ryong calls him scum and demands to know why he betrayed their family. The man, introducing himself as Sin Ji-hyak, denies being a traitor, claiming he has been loyal to his lord from the very beginning. As Sin Ji-hyak unsheathes his sword, he reveals with pride that he has been planning this bloodbath for over 20 years. Yang Ryong, shocked by his confession, demands to know if this has been his plan all along, and Sin Ji-hyak smugly thanks her for treating him well before promising her a painless death. Meanwhile, Yang Ryong feels a moment of relief, realizing the men haven't noticed Sinha Hyan yet, and she resolves to buy as much time as possible. Sin Ji-hyak mockingly assures her that Sinha Hyan won't escape for long and promises to send him to join her soon, which only enrages her further. Raising his hand, Sin Ji-hyak orders his men to kill her, and the assassins charge forward with their weapons drawn. Despite being outnumbered, Yang Ryong bravely swings her sword with precision, fiercely fighting back against the assassins. With a powerful and defiant strike, she cuts down one of the attackers and yells that she won't let anyone harm her son. After a fierce and desperate struggle, Yang Ryong is finally brought down to the ground, and Sin Ji-hyak looms over her, mocking her futile resistance. Sin Ji-hyak then orders his men to search the forest thoroughly and find Sinha Hyan. After a while, Sin Ji-hyak grows frustrated, cursing loudly as they fail to find Sinha Hyan, unaware that the boy is hiding underground, hands clasped over his mouth. Tears stream down Sinha Hyan's face as he realizes what likely happened to his mother, but he forces himself to stay silent to avoid discovery. Like a game of life and death hide and seek, Sinha Hyan uses the turtle breathing technique, holding his breath and erasing his presence entirely. Meanwhile, Sin Ji-hyak and his men continue searching the forest frantically, their frustration mounting. Hours later, Sinha Hyan finally emerges from a small hole in the ground. He wanders the forest like a lost child, grief-stricken and clutching onto his mother's last instructions to find his grandfather in the Namgung clan. Using 2 sticks to determine the direction, Sinha Hyan notes that Anhui province, home to the Namgung clan, is quite far from his current location. As a toddler, Sin Ji-hyak had taught Sinha Hyan the method of determining direction using the shadows of the sun. Recalling this, Sinha Hyan still struggles to believe that his beloved uncle ultimately betrayed them. Although they were not related by blood, Sinha Hyan had learned a great deal from Sin Ji-hyak. Ha Hyan's father had even acknowledged Ji Hyuk by granting him the Sin family name, and back then, Sin Ha Hyan had been the happiest of all. But now, everything has changed, happiness replaced by the burning desire to one day avenge his mother. A few days pass, and the rain continues to pour relentlessly over the vast, dark hills and dense forest. Inside a cold, damp cave, Sin Ha Hyan sits on the hard ground, panting heavily, his body bruised from days of exhausting travel. Over the past few days, he has narrowly escaped death several times, whether from consuming poisonous mushrooms out of hunger or enduring the terrifying gaze of wild animals in the night. Carefully rationing the fire-starting papers and silver coins his mother packed for him, Sin Ha Hyan avoids wasting them unnecessarily. Yet, this journey has not been without gain, as Sin Ha Hyan has managed to acquire something valuable along the way. Sitting cross-legged, he places his hands on his lap, fingertips joined, and begins channeling his internal energy cultivation technique. For context, let's step back 3 years into Ha Hyan's past. Seated before his mother, Namgung, Sin Ha Hyan attentively listens as she begins teaching him the Changung Daean inner energy technique. Namgung only explained this method once, and Sin Ha Hyan gave it his undivided attention. The young Sin Ha Hyan instinctively asked no questions, sensing his mother's sorrowful expression, and simply listened intently. Back in the present, Sin Ha Hyan has not only mastered the technique from a single lesson but has comprehended its every method. After channeling energy for several seconds, he opens his eyes, takes a deep breath, and, though slightly exhausted, decides that it's enough for today. Clenching his fists with determination, he resolves to test his hunting skills. Out in the dense forest, Sin Ha Hyan spots a white rabbit and quickly hides behind a tree, careful not to be noticed. Waiting for the rabbit to turn its back, Sin Ha Hyan quietly steps out from behind the tree, raising his hands in preparation to pounce. At the perfect moment, Sin Ha Hyan dives toward the rabbit but narrowly misses as it leaps away. Refusing to give up, he takes off after the rabbit, his determination fueling his every step. Putting all his strength into his legs, Sin Ha Hyan suddenly feels his body become unexpectedly lighter. He freezes for a moment, stunned, as he notices his internal energy flaring outward like gentle flames, enhancing his physical abilities. Channeling this newfound energy, Sin Ha Hyan pushes forward, diving straight for the fleeing rabbit with his arms outstretched. This time, luck is on his side, and Sin Ha Hyan manages to grab the rabbit by its two large ears. Holding his catch, Sin Ha Hyan wonders about the strange sensation that lightened his body and concludes it might be the power of his inner energy. Realizing the potential dangers of this power, he resolves to carefully control and understand it. Later that evening, Sin Ha Hyan uses the last of his fire-starting paper to light a fire. He reflects on having used nearly 30 papers and guesses that it has been at least 2 months since he lost his mother. Gazing up at the clear, starry sky, Sin Ha Hyan estimates that he must have been in Hunan province for quite some time. Rising to his feet, he decides he has accumulated enough inner energy to escape if needed and plans to head toward the nearest village. The next day, Sin Ha Hyan arrives in Gushi County, a bustling village filled with the chatter of its lively residents. He bows deeply, thanking a kind man who provided answers to his questions, and the man smiles warmly, dismissing Ha Hyan's gratitude. As a gesture of kindness, the man hands Sin Ha Hyan a large dumpling, encouraging him to eat. Taking a bite, Sin Ha Hyan experiences a rare moment of comfort, feeling that perhaps the martial world isn't entirely cruel. Based on the information he has gathered, this village is located in southeastern Hunan province, confirming that Sin Ha Hyan is heading in the right direction. With the marketplace bustling due to market day, Sin Ha Hyan decides to purchase some fire-starting papers before continuing his journey. Just then, a voice calls out to him, prompting Sin Ha Hyan to turn around, only to be confronted by a group of beggar children. The children accuse him of trespassing on their territory, their voices filled with hostility. Sin Ha Hyan watches in puzzlement at being called out by the 3 beggar kids. The bald kid at the front angrily asks Sin Ha Hyan why he isn't responding when being asked a question. Sin Ha Hyan still doesn't speak, making the bald kid even angrier as he warns Sin Ha Hyan and points at the knot on his waist. Ha Hyan, having no idea what it is, asks the kid what the hell the knot even means. Pointing at Sin Ha Hyan, the bald kid angrily accuses him of not recognizing the beggar's sect symbol and breaking the rules by begging here. Looking at the dumpling, Sin Ha Hyan realizes the kids think he's begging, so he clarifies he's not a beggar and agrees to leave. However, the bald kid raises the stick in his hand and declares he will teach Sin Ha Hyan a lesson in manners. With that, he charges straight at Ha Hyan, introducing himself as Ma Yuncheol, a first-not disciple of the great beggar's sect. Ha Hyan, with his quick reflexes, ducks down and dodges the stick swung at him. He leaps aside to dodge Ma Yuncheol's second attack, angering Ma Yuncheol, who swings the stick harder, prompting Sin Ha Hyan to leap off the ground to avoid it. Sin Ha Hyan feels like Ma Yuncheol is extremely slow, even slower than the rabbit he had hunted yesterday. Ma Yuncheol admits that Sin Ha Hyan is quite nimble and prepares to attack him again, this time using internal energy, daring Sin Ha Hyan to dodge now. Clutching the stick, Ma Yuncheol charges at Ha Hyan, leaps into the air, and raises it to crush him. This time, Sin Ha Hyan realizes he won't be able to dodge, so he switches to plan B and kicks Ma Yuncheol directly in the gut before he gets hit. Hit by such a powerful kick, Ma Yuncheol is taken aback as he is sent flying backward, crashing into the ground and screaming out loud. Sin Ha Hyan thinks he might have overused his strength and tells the other two beggar kids that he didn't mean to do that. Sin Ha Hyan quickly turns around and runs away as he notices the two beggar kids are now pissed off at him. Watching Sin Ha Hyan disappear into the thick crowd of people, the two kids decide to report this incident to the branch leader. After running for a while, Sin Ha Hyan enters the forest, feeling safe and unnoticed by anyone. He recalls how Ma Yuncheol used martial arts and realizes that even beggars in this world are capable of using martial arts. Gripping the stick tightly, Sin Ha Hyan raises his other hand before his chest and tries to replicate how Ma Yuncheol had used the technique. He points out that the way Ma Yuncheol swung the stick earlier was extremely clumsy, though the flying stick technique was quite sharp. Sin Ha Hyan then starts developing and thinking of different ways and techniques to perfect it. The next morning, hearing the birds chirping, Sin Ha Hyan realizes it's already morning and that he has been training all night. Today, he makes up his mind to get the fire-starting paper and move forward, deciding not to linger any longer. So, leaving his stick behind, he walks out of the forest and heads to the village. A shopkeeper sees Sin Ha Hyan and, judging by his appearance and clothing, asks him if he is a beggar. The shopkeeper makes it clear that he has no spare food to give away, but Sin Ha Hyan explains that he is not a beggar and is here to buy something. Hearing Sin Ha Hyan wants to buy something, the shopkeeper grows suspicious but notices his face, thinking he might not be a beggar. So he asks Sin Ha Hyan what he wants to buy, and Sin Ha Hyan inquires if he has any fire-starting paper. The shopkeeper replies that he only has low-quality fire-starting paper, and Sin Ha Hyan asks him to sell as much as he can for a single silver coin. The shopkeeper claims he can only give Sin Ha Hyan 10 fire-starting sheets for 1 silver coin. A drunk beggar stumbles over, points at the shopkeeper, and accuses him of lying, saying 1 silver coin should buy at least 30 fire-starting sheets. The shopkeeper shouts angrily at the old drunk man, insisting that his price for the fire-starting sheets is fair. The old drunk examines Sin Ha Hyan and comments that his clear skin shows he's not a beggar, though his clothes look months old. The drunk man also remarks that Sin Ha Hyan could have bought new clothes with that silver coin and continues rambling non-stop. This makes the shopkeeper snarl angrily, furious that the drunk man is ruining his morning. Sin Ha Hyan bows and thanks the old drunk for his help, and the drunk man waves it off, saying it's no big deal. Suddenly, a loud shout grabs Sin Ha Hyan and the old drunk's attention, making them turn sideways. Sin Ha Hyan is startled to see the beggar kids from the previous day, and with them stands the branch leader. The beggars sect surround Ha Hyan, with Ma Yuncheol pointing at him and telling the branch leader he's the one encroaching on their territory. The branch leader is a fat man named Bagwu, whose face closely resembles that of a pig. Finding himself surrounded, Sin Ha Hyan looks a little concerned, realizing that escaping will be difficult. Bagwu shouts, demanding to know how Sin Ha Hyan dares attack a beggar's sect disciple, then his eyes fall on the old drunk beside him. Bagwu suddenly drops to his knees and bows deeply before the old drunk, addressing him as First Elder, Drunken Moon Heroic Beggar. The elder beggar casually remarks that he remembers Bagwu as just a snot-nosed first disciple back in the day. Bagwu asks the elder beggar why he's here, and the elder replies he's just come to beg for wine from the Zhang family. Learning the old drunk is a beggar's sect elder, Sin Ha Hyan glances at him curiously. Bagwu explains to the elder that one of their disciples was attacked, so he has come to settle the matter. Hearing this, the elder beggar unleashes a burst of intense rage, exuding such an overwhelming pressure. He angrily demands to know who dared to attack a disciple of the beggar's sect. Seeing the elder's terrifying rage, Bagwu hastily assures him it is not a big deal and was merely a small quarrel between children. Bagwu then adds that despite Ma Yuncheol having mastered the 98 striking techniques, he was defeated by another beggar. Ma Yuncheol raises a finger at Sin Ha Hyan and reveals that it was Sin Ha Hyan who defeated him. Sin Ha Hyan sternly warns Ma Yuncheol to watch his words, reminding him that he started the fight. Clenching his teeth, Ma Yuncheol snaps, claiming he was punishing Sin Ha Hyan for encroaching, prompting Sin Ha Hyan to firmly repeat he's not a beggar. Glaring at Ma Yuncheol, Bagwu angrily asks why he didn't mention that he had attacked first, making Ma Yuncheol look guilty. The elder beggar calls everyone blind and questions how they could even think Sin Ha Hyan is a beggar, pointing out his clean face. Bagwu apologizes and promises to settle the matter later, while the elder beggar questions Ma Yuncheol if he was really defeated by Ha Hyan. Ma Yuncheol denies it, claiming he only lost because he let his guard down. The elder beggar asks if Ma Yuncheol means he would win if he had not let his guard down. Suggesting a solution, the elder proposes that Sin Ha Hyan and Ma Yuncheol fight right here and now to see if Ma Yuncheol can actually win. The elder clarifies that it will be a proper martial arts match and encourages Sin Ha Hyan to teach Ma Yuncheol another lesson like before. After a few minutes, Sin Ha Hyan and Ma Yuncheol move to an open space and prepare for their martial arts duel. Ma Yuncheol introduces himself and asks Sin Ha Hyan for his name, but Sin Ha Hyan refuses to answer. Feeling insulted, Ma Yuncheol becomes enraged and accuses Sin Ha Hyan of being disrespectful. He charges at Ha Hyan, daring him to block his attacks this time. Moving his foot slightly, Sin Ha Hyan sidesteps with ease, effortlessly dodging the charge. Observing this, both the elder beggar and Bagwu praise Sin Ha Hyan for his clean and precise footwork. Ma Yuncheol swings his stick at Sin Ha Hyan again, but Sin Ha Hyan simply dashes backward, avoiding the attack. Sin Ha Hyan notices that Ma Yuncheol has too many openings and is recklessly attacking without paying any attention to his defense. Deciding to counter, Sin Ha Hyan raises his stick and strikes Ma Yuncheol squarely across the face. Stunned by the blow, Ma Yuncheol is momentarily bewildered. Without hesitation, Sin Ha Hyan raises his stick again and, under the elder beggar's watchful gaze, delivers another strike, sending Ma Yuncheol flying backward. With a loud crash, Ma Yuncheol hits the ground and lets out a groan of pain. Sighing, Sin Ha Hyan hopes this is enough to shatter Ma Yuncheol's ego. Suddenly, the elder beggar grabs Ha Hyan's collar from behind and lifts him up, demanding to know where he learned those techniques. The elder shouts, questioning how Sin Ha Hyan knows the martial arts of the beggar's sect. Sin Ha Hyan shouts back, insisting that he didn't learn from anyone and claiming he simply copied what Ma Yuncheol did yesterday. Shocked to hear this, the elder beggar releases Sin Ha Hyan and asks if he truly learned it just by observing. Sin Ha Hyan explains that he analyzed Ma Yuncheol's techniques yesterday and then improvised them to make them stronger. The elder acknowledges that this is true, noting that the technique Sin Ha Hyan used was not the first move of the 98 striking techniques, but an improvised one. He then asks Sin Ha Hyan which sect he belongs to, and Sin Ha Hyan replies that he does not belong to any sect. The elder beggar inquires about Ha Hyan's family, but Sin Ha Hyan hesitates to answer. The elder reassures him, explaining that the beggar's sect has always accepted disciples with complicated backgrounds and never asks about their pasts. Finally, the elder extends a hand to Ha Hyan, inviting him to become his disciple. Presented with such an unexpected offer, Sin Ha Hyan remains silent for a moment, still processing the information. Did he hear that right? Becoming the elder's direct disciple could mean a shot at Dragon Head branch leader. Meanwhile, even Bagwu is shocked, as he knows the elder has never taken a disciple before. The elder, renowned for wandering the world and acting freely, is respected without question as a martial artist of the highest caliber. Bagwu concludes that the elder must have seen some extraordinary talent in Sin Ha Hyan to make such an offer. After a brief silence, Sin Ha Hyan bows sincerely to the elder and politely declines the offer with an apology. Witnessing this, both Bagwu and Ma Yuncheol are stunned, unable to believe what they just heard. Pointing a finger at Ha Hyan, Ma Yuncheol scolds him, asking if he even understands the opportunity he is refusing. However, the elder cuts off Ma Yuncheol and calmly asks Sin Ha Hyan why he has declined. Sin Ha Hyan explains his reasons, saying the first is because he doesn't know the elder well, and the second is that he has somewhere else he needs to go. With a faint smile, the elder remarks that it's the first time he's tried to accept a disciple and asks Sin Ha Hyan where he's heading. Sin Ha Hyan hesitates to answer, prompting the elder to sternly warn him not to make him ask twice. Left with no choice, Sin Ha Hyan finally reveals that he is headed to the Namgung clan. Turning his back to Ha Hyan, the elder walks away, bidding him farewell and wishing him a safe journey. Seeing this strange behavior from the elder, Sin Ha Hyan is momentarily taken aback. As Sin Ha Hyan prepares to leave, Bagwu apologizes for the trouble caused, and Sin Ha Hyan forgives him, thanking him instead. Clenching his fist, Ma Yuncheol declares that the next time he encounters Ha Hyan, he will undoubtedly defeat him. Ma Yuncheol then asks for Ha Hyan's name and this time, Sin Ha Hyan obliges and answers. Ma Yuncheol presses further for Ha Hyan's family name, but Sin Ha Hyan remains silent, leading Ma Yuncheol to tell him to remember his name well instead. With that, Ma Yuncheol ascends the stairs and heads into the house alongside Bagwu. Relieved that the ordeal is over, Sin Ha Hyan decides to move on as well, but suddenly the elder charges toward him, startling him. The elder, shouting loudly, demands to know if Sin Ha Hyan found him inadequate as a master, leading to his rejection. Looming over Ha Hyan, the elder asks why he's going to the Namgung clan, and Sin Ha Hyan replies he's going to meet someone. The elder gets so close to Ha Hyan's face that he begins finding it familiar, as if he's seen it before. Suddenly, the elder's eyes widen with excitement as he places his hands on Ha Haiyan's shoulders, exclaiming that his eyes resemble Yang Ryong's. The elder points out how Ha Haiyan's eyes are unfathomably deeper and more intense than Yang Ryong's. Shaking Sin Ha Haiyan by the shoulders, the elder demands to know what relation he has to Yang Ryong. But before Sin Ha Haiyan can answer, the elder declares he will personally escort him to the Namgung clan, leaving Sin Ha Haiyan shocked. His face brimming with excitement, the elder informs the Zhang family he came to beg from that he will have drinks with them later. The head of the Zhang family tells the elder to wait and offers him a backpack and some food, suggesting he carry Sin Ha Haiyan on his back. The elder insists a backpack doesn't suit his dignity, prompting the Zhang family head to smirk and ask when he ever had any. Ultimately, the elder gives in, puts on the backpack, kneels, and asks Sin Ha Haiyan to climb on. Ha Haiyan's mind races, there's no escaping the elder, who oddly seems to know his mother. With no choice but to trust, Sin Ha Haiyan climbs onto the elder's back as he rises, urging him to hold on tight. Suddenly, Sin Ha Haiyan feels a jolt as his hair flies back and everything around him blurs. The elder seems to be moving at blinding speed, telling Sin Ha Haiyan they will reach their destination in no time. Night falls, and the elder and Sin Ha Haiyan are still traveling, soaring through the dark sky. Turning slightly, the elder claims it's been a while since he's run this much, admits he's getting tired, and asks how Sin Ha Haiyan is holding up. Sin Ha Haiyan doesn't respond, so the elder lands and asks if he's sleeping, to which Sin Ha Haiyan replies that he isn't. Annoyed, the elder tells Sin Ha Haiyan to speak up faster next time, and Sin Ha Haiyan explains he was observing and studying the elder's running technique. Hearing this, the elder is startled, and Sin Ha Haiyan admits he can't replicate the technique yet due to his limited inner energy. The elder asks if Sin Ha Haiyan means he could replicate it with more inner energy, and Sin Ha Haiyan admits he could, but not perfectly. The elder explains his technique expels inner energy from the soles of his feet, and Sin Ha Haiyan adds he noticed the elder recovers energy by lifting his foot. Shocked by Ha Haiyan's insight, the elder is left bewildered for a moment. The elder realizes that Sin Ha Haiyan is a once-in-a-millennium genius with extraordinary talent. He instructs Sin Ha Haiyan to hold on tightly again, prompting Sin Ha Haiyan to ask if they aren't going to rest. The elder, too curious to rest, insists on reaching the Namgung clan as quickly as possible. Arriving at the Namgung clan, the elder sets Sin Ha Haiyan down and stretches his back, both of them now standing before the grand main gate of the clan. According to the map, it should have taken Sin Ha Haiyan 10 days to reach this place, but the elder brought them here in just 2. Now Sin Ha Haiyan grasps the elder's immense inner energy and wonders if he could ever wield such power. With such immense energy, Sin Ha Haiyan believes he could have saved his mother and family from their tragic fate. The elder knocks firmly on the gate, calling for the guards, and soon a man peeks out, asking who is there. The man quickly recognizes the elder as the famous Lord Drunken Moon, the heroic beggar, and is visibly astonished to see him there. Sin Ha Haiyan asks the elder if he knows the Namgung clan, and the elder confirms, having stayed there just 10 days ago. The man, Jangchil, warmly welcomes the elder, noting that the clan head hasn't retired yet. Noticing Ha Haiyan, Jangchil curiously asks who the boy is, to which the elder responds that Sin Ha Haiyan is accompanying him. Since the elder vouches for Ha Haiyan, Jangchil permits him to enter as well. As they walk, Ha Haiyan's eyes wander, taking in the surroundings, which he finds even more beautiful and magnificent than his previous home. He notices Jangchil's extraordinary grace, making Sin Ha Haiyan wonder if all the servants here practice martial arts. Jangchil leads them to the training hall, prompting the elder to ask if the clan head is still training this late into the night. Jangchil confirms, saying the clan head has been there since hearing the news, making the elder click his tongue in annoyance. The elder announces his arrival from outside, calling out to the clan head, Muriong, who grants him entry. Pushing open the door, the elder steps in and asks Muriong why he's training so hard as if it could change the news. Muriong chuckles softly, replying that as he grows older, he finds it harder to sleep and prefers to spend his time here. Shifting his tone, Muriong asks the elder about his visit, reminding him that he had mentioned heading to Gansu days ago. The elder laughs in return, noting that he changed his plans, while Muriong's eyes shift to Ha Haiyan, prompting him to inquire about the boy. The elder explains that his reason for returning lies with this boy, and then asks Muriong if Sin Ha Haiyan looks familiar. As Muriong scrutinizes Ha Haiyan's face, his eyes suddenly widen in shock, seeing a striking resemblance to his daughter in the boy's features and eyes. Sharing Muriong's reaction, the elder admits he felt the same way and urges Sin Ha Haiyan to state his surname to clear any doubts. Sin Ha Haiyan steps forward slowly, bows deeply to Muriong and greets him, addressing him as grandfather. He then retrieves a token from his belongings, one that his mother had given him, and presents it to Muriong. The moment Muriong sees the token, he immediately recognizes it as belonging to his daughter, Yang Ryong. Introducing himself, Sin Ha-hyun declares that he is the son of Yang Ryong, confirming his lineage to Myeryong. Overwhelmed with emotion, Myeryong lunges forward, enveloping Sin Ha-hyun in a tight embrace, relieved his grandson is alive and well. Sin Ha-hyun explains that he traveled here from the Sin family in Shaanxi. Myeryong urgently asks Sin Ha-hyun if he survived the Sin family attack and inquires about his mother's whereabouts. Sin Ha-hyun solemnly recounts that his mother ensured his escape but stayed behind to hold off the pursuers. Myeryong's long-held suspicions about his daughter's fate are confirmed, filling him with deep regret for allowing her to marry, thinking she might still be alive otherwise. Tightening his embrace, Myeryong acknowledges Ha-hyun's struggles and reassures him everything will be alright, bringing tears to Ha-hyun's eyes. Unable to contain himself, Sin Ha-hyun breaks down, sobbing in his grandfather's arms. Once he has calmed down, Sin Ha-hyun recounts all the events leading up to this moment, including how Sin Ji-hyuk betrayed them. Upon hearing the name, the elder turns to Myeryong, asking if it rings any bells, but Myeryong admits it is unfamiliar to him. The elder asks Sin Ha-hyun if he knows Sin Ji-hyuk's original surname before joining the Sin family, and Sin Ha-hyun identifies it as Yu Ji-hyuk. The elder confesses he knows no one with the surname Yu and speculates that even this name might have been fabricated. Sighing heavily, Myeryong remarks that they are back to square one, with no clear leads on the betrayer. However, he looks at Sin Ha-hyun and retracts his previous statement, declaring that something significant has indeed changed. Sin Ha-hyun has returned to them alive. Reflecting on the past, Myeryong regrets not visiting Yang Ryong even once in the 7 years since her marriage, a decision that weighs heavily on him now. The elder shifts the mood, humorously complaining that Sin Ha-hyun was heavy to carry and announces his plan to stay at the Namgung clan for a few days. Laughing, Myeryong teases the elder, suggesting that he should just settle here permanently. Myeryong warmly tells Sin Ha-hyun to make himself at home, and Sin Ha-hyun responds with a grateful smile. Myeryong starts fussing over Ha-hyun, asking if he wants anything and promises to fulfill any wish he might have. Observing Myeryong, renowned as the iron-blooded warrior, transform into a doting grandfather, the elder finds himself genuinely impressed. Hesitating for a moment, Sin Ha-hyun says he has something to do, prompting Myeryong to encourage him to speak freely. Gathering his resolve, Sin Ha-hyun requests Myeryong to teach him martial arts. Myeryong is utterly stunned, completely unprepared for such a request from his young grandson. Myeryong looks at Ha-hyun, his eyes filled with curiosity, as he asks if Sin Ha-hyun truly wants to learn martial arts. He questions if Sin Ha-hyun seeks powerful martial arts for revenge, warning he won't teach him if so, but Sin Ha-hyun assures him that's not his intention. Sin Ha-hyun explains he wants to learn martial arts to become strong and never lose anything precious again. He declares that from now on, he intends to protect those dear to him with his own 2 hands. Myeryong, pleased by Ha-hyun's reasoning, reminds him that the Namgung clan doesn't guarantee immediate training just for wanting to learn. He then points out that tomorrow is the annual entrance exam for the Blue Dragon Pavilion, suggesting that Sin Ha-hyun pass it. The following morning, Myeryong is in his chamber when a man named Cheol arrives to visit him. Cheol greets Myeryong with respect, announcing his arrival. Myeryong immediately orders Cheol to recall all the clan members who had been sent to search for the Sin family. Surprised by such an order, Cheol, addressing Myeryong as father, reminds him that they have not yet found anyone. Myeryong, his voice calm but resolute, tells Cheol that his daughter is already dead. Cheol, his mouth agape in shock, asks if any new information has come to light, to which Myeryong affirms, explaining that his nephew has arrived. Myeryong proceeds to tell Cheol how Sin Ha-hyun arrived at the clan the previous night, accompanied by the beggar elder. Cheol asks where Sin Ha-hyun is, and Myeryong replies he's taking the Blue Dragon Pavilion entrance exam today. Myeryong emphasizes that Sin Ha-hyun has expressed a desire to learn martial arts to become stronger and to protect those around him. Cheol asks how old Sin Ha-hyun is, to which Myeryong replies that he is only 10 years old. Cheol comments that although the Blue Dragon Pavilion entrance exam is basic, it's not easy for a 10-year-old to pass. Myeryong reminds Cheol that Hwan passed at 11, Soa at 12 and Min at 8. Cheol acknowledges this but notes that those who passed had early training, while Sin Ha-hyun might lack that foundation. Myeryong reassures Cheol, telling him not to worry, explaining that even if Sin Ha-hyun fails, he will still be a part of the Namgung clan. Cheol, letting out a sigh, acknowledges Myeryong's words and agrees that Sin Ha-hyun is indeed their own blood relative. Pleased by Cheol's understanding, Myeryong assigns him the responsibility of looking after Sin Ha-hyun and gives him permission to leave. Once alone, Myeryong strokes his beard with a satisfied smirk, recalling what the beggar elder had told him about Ha-hyun's strength. At the Blue Dragon Pavilion, the scene is bustling with excitement, a large crowd of people already gathered. Soa, her face beaming with excitement, spots Sin Ha-hyun and calls out to him, asking if he is there for the entrance exam as well. Sinha Hyan nods affirmatively, and Soa, in her usual cheerful manner, remarks that she didn't expect to see someone her age there. With a wide smile, she introduces herself as the granddaughter of the head of the Namgung clan. Upon hearing that Soa is the granddaughter of his grandfather, Sinha Hyan is taken aback, surprised by the connection. Soa, eyes sparkling, exclaims that she plans to become a strong martial artist and one day be clan head. She then asks Sinha Hyan for his name, and Sinha Hyan introduces himself in return. With a final smile, Soa waves goodbye to Sinha Hyan and walks away, leaving him standing there, watching her disappear as he waves back. Hyan, deep in thought, wonders how many more family members might be part of the Namgung clan. Remembering his grandfather's invitation to live with them, Sinha Hyan is touched, realizing that for the first time, he truly has a family. Just then, he hears a loud shout and turns around to see a young man who had just failed the exam, angrily demanding to be allowed a retest. Sinha Hyan quickly realizes that the exam has begun, as the remaining examinees gather around the examiner. As the exam progresses, some candidates fail and break down in tears, while others pass and celebrate their success with excitement. Hyan, quietly observing, keeps track of those who pass, noting that out of hundreds of applicants, only 30 have made it through so far. A little while later, Soa, beaming with excitement, bursts into the crowd, shouting that she has passed the exam, and runs to hug someone in celebration. The examiner then announces that the last person remaining for the test is Sinha Hyan and calls him forward. Sinha Hyan walks confidently towards the examination hall in response to the examiner's call. Ju-hyun, in charge of basic martial arts, greets Sinha Hyan and explains the fair entrance exam process, warning that failure means retaking it next year. The first test is a movement challenge, where Sinha Hyan must follow the footprints on the training ground in any pattern he chooses. Grateful for the explanation, Sinha Hyan thanks Ju-hyun and immediately dashes forward, his feet gliding effortlessly across the pattern, almost as if dancing. Within seconds, Sinha Hyan completes the pattern, standing before Ju-hyun, his movements smooth and fluid. Ju-hyun, initially doubtful, is stunned as Sinha Hyan calmly asks if the first exam is over. Ju-hyun, originally a martial artist with the surname Hwang, had earned a respected position in the martial arts world. 10 years ago, he successfully passed the Blue Dragon Pavilion entrance exam, and 3 years ago, he was granted the Namgung surname by Muriong himself. What earned him the greatest recognition from Muriong was his exceptional ability to spot untapped talent. Today, however, Ju-hyun found himself bored beyond measure, as the candidates before him were all disappointingly average. A few had shown small glimpses of exceptional talent, but overall, the level of ability was far below the standards of the previous year. That was until he observed Sinha Hyan. He asks Sinha Hyan if he has ever studied footwork in his life. Sinha Hyan denies it, claiming that he simply followed the pattern laid before him. Ju-hyun instructs Sinha Hyan to step aside and wait for further instructions. Once Sinha Hyan leaves, Ju-hyun turns slightly and asks Cheol, wondering what exactly Sinha Hyan is. Cheol suggests that there might indeed be a deeper reason behind their father's decision to allow Sinha Hyan to take the exam. Standing before the remaining candidates, Ju-hyun instructs those who have passed the first test to step aside. Noticing Sinha Hyan, Soa waves at him, asking if he has passed too, to which Sinha Hyan smiles and nods. Congratulating the candidates, Ju-hyun tells them that passing the second test will make them Blue Dragon Pavilion members. He then reveals that the second test will be a sparring match with martial artists from the Blue Dragon Pavilion. At this announcement, some candidates frown, murmuring among themselves about how they can possibly win against experienced martial artists. Ju-hyun, hearing their concerns, reassures them that it will not be a real duel, but a simplified match designed to assess their abilities. He also reminds them that the goal isn't for the candidates to win, as no one has ever managed to do so. Wishing the candidates the best of luck, Ju-hyun instructs them to enter the arena one by one as their names are called. Some candidates grumble in frustration over the test, while others grin, eager for the challenge. Sinha Hyan thinks to himself that the more confident ones must have full faith in their abilities. The first name called is Sinha Hyan, and he enters the arena with determination. Ju-hyun gestures for Sinha Hyan to step forward for his match against the Blue Dragon Pavilion martial artist. He explains that in this simplified match, using any striking techniques is prohibited. The only way to win is by pushing the opponent down. Taking a deep breath, Sinha Hyan acknowledges with a nod. The opponent, who will be facing Sinha Hyan, walks up to him with a smile, calling him little brother. He introduces himself as Namgung Hwan, Sinha Hyan's second cousin, and points out that he has asked to face Sinha Hyan first. With a confident grin, Hwan claims he wants to see Sinha Hyan's abilities firsthand. Getting into a fighting stance, Hwan encourages Sinha Hyan to give it his best shot. Sinha Hyan also assumes a stance, and as the match begins, he immediately dashes toward Hwan. Channeling his inner energy into his feet, Sinha Hyan shoots forward with lightning speed, reaching Hwan before he even has a chance to react. The spectators, witnessing such incredible speed, are left stunned and wide-eyed in disbelief. Sinha Hyan attempts to push Hwan from behind with his palms, but Hwan effortlessly sidesteps, mocking him as he does so. Then, with a swift counter, Hwan pushes Sinha Hyan backward. Hwan praises Sinha Hyan for his swift movements, noting that if he had been a fraction faster, he could have gained the upper hand. Ju Hyun, having seen both judgment and technique in Sinha Hyan's actions, is ready to end the match, but his curiosity urges him to see more. Hwan, now demonstrating his own impressive speed, moves in a blur, weaving back and forth as he advances toward Sinha Hyan. Sinha Hyan recognizes the footwork Hwan is using as the same pattern that has been etched into the training ground during the first test. Raising his hand, Hwan swings it towards Sinha Hyan, but the latter swiftly ducks, dodging the attack with ease. Seeing Sinha Hyan's quick reflexes, Cheol, watching from the sidelines, is shocked. Meanwhile, Hwan realizes that Sinha Hyan has already figured out his movements and is taken by surprise when Sinha Hyan charges at him out of nowhere. For the first time since the Blue Dragon Pavilion entrance exam began, a Blue Dragon Pavilion martial artist has been defeated. Sinha Hyan manages to push Hwan to the ground. The one who lost is none other than Hwan, the grandson of the Sword Saint, known for possessing the greatest martial arts talent. Brushing his back hair nervously, Hwan forces out a laugh, reluctantly admitting that he did lose. Bowing respectfully, Sinha Hyan humbly claims his victories are mere luck, insisting his opponents always let their guard down. Gaihin approaches Sinha Hyan and asks how on earth he managed to pull it off. He presses Sinha Hyan, questioning how he mastered the infinite steps, reminding him that he claimed never to have learned the footwork. Sinha Hyan responds by saying he merely recognized the steps Hwan used as being similar to the ones performed during the first test. Hearing this, Gaihin is left speechless, astonished that Sinha Hyan managed to figure out the steps just by observing them once. This realization makes Gaihin wonder if Sinha Hyan could become the greatest talent, even surpassing those he had seen before. He tells Sinha Hyan that he has passed, to which Sinha Hyan responds with gratitude. Gaihin quickly points out that there's no need for thanks since Sinha Hyan had proven himself more than capable. Smiling, Gaihin adds that he looks forward to guiding Sinha Hyan in the future. A while later, Sinha Hyan steps out of the exam hall and finds himself the center of attention, with other contestants eagerly wondering if he passed or failed. Sowa spots Sinha Hyan and calls out to him, prompting him to glance sideways in her direction. Approaching Sinha Hyan, Sowa immediately asks whether he failed or passed the test. Sinha Hyan calmly replies that he didn't fail but rather passed. Upon hearing this, Sowa studies his breathing and aura, realizing that Sinha Hyan seems to have already learned martial arts before. With a knowing smile, Sowa tells Sinha Hyan she looks forward to working with him, then turns and walks away. Back in his room, Sinha Hyan reflects deeply, contemplating how his and Hwan's infinite steps had distinct auras from the very beginning. He recalls that Hwan's footsteps became gradually softer as he approached during the match. Determined to replicate the technique, Sinha Hyan adjusts his posture and gets his body into position. Digging his heels into the ground, he propels himself forward, performing the footwork in a zigzag motion across the floor. This intricate footwork, known as running on grass without disturbing the blades, is the pinnacle of mastery, and Sinha Hyan has just achieved it. Suddenly, Sinha Hyan realizes he can't stop and ends up crashing into the wall, causing a loud, echoing sound. Startled by the noise, a servant rushes in and asks Sinha Hyan if he's alright. Sinha Hyan reassures the servant he's fine, but the servant, noticing the dust, suggests he change before others arrive. With a warm smile, the servant informs Sinha Hyan that the head of the clan wishes to introduce him to the rest of the family. Upon seeing Sinha Hyan there, Sowa is taken aback and questions if he has mistakenly entered the wrong house. The family head, Myeryong, steps in and assures Sowa that Sinha Hyan is indeed in the right place. He then reveals that Sinha Hyan is her cousin, leaving Sowa completely stunned by the unexpected revelation. Furious, Sowa demands why she wasn't told, but Gaihin calmly explains Sinha Hyan arrived yesterday. Myeryong asks Sinha Hyan's age, and when he says 10, Sowa proudly declares herself his elder sister. Myeryong then instructs Sinha Hyan to sit at the dining table, pointing out that it will be his designated seat from now on. Once seated, Myeryong tells Sinha Hyan his quarters will be moved to his mother's old room, already prepared. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Sinha Hyan thanks his grandfather sincerely. The family begins their dinner, chatting joyfully and cherishing the moment together. For the first time, Sinha Hyan feels like he has returned home, albeit to a new one. Cheol notices Sinha Hyan and smiles at him, prompting Sinha Hyan to ask if there's something Cheol wants to say. Laughing nervously, Cheol apologizes for staring. Cheol then shares that she had joined the Blue Dragon Pavilion at around 10 years old, just like Sinha Hyen's mother. Cheol informs Sinha Hyen that his training will start the next day, cautioning that it might be tough at first but emphasizing how rare his talents are. Interrupting, Soa assures Sinha Hyen that she will guide him as his older sister. Later, at the Blue Dragon Pavilion, the candidates who passed gather as their instructor addresses them from the stage. The instructor warns the students that they are currently at the very bottom and advises them never to act recklessly, which they acknowledge solemnly. 3 days into training, Sinha Hyen is already looking exhausted and worn out. Not only him, but everyone else lies on the ground, panting and drained, as the instructor, Gaihyun, yells at them to get back up. That evening, Sinha Hyen lies in bed, sweating and breathless, admitting the training is brutal. He recalls holding a horse stance without using inner energy and repeating straight punches for 2 exhausting hours non-stop. To make it worse, Juhyun scolded Sinha Hyen, insisting he focus only on the basics. Thinking about this, Sinha Hyen clenches his teeth, feeling a surge of anger at himself. Calming himself down, he reminds himself that his grandfather must have endured the same process, motivating him to stand up and not waste any time. Sitting cross-legged and drawing his palms together, he begins channeling his inner energy with focused determination. Circulating his chi, he heals his torn muscles and expels turbid energy from his body, finding relief in the process. After a while, he opens his eyes, sighing in satisfaction as he notices his chi circulation becoming more stable each day. For days pass, and Sinha Hyen is seen practicing straight punches alongside the other disciples with intense focus. Observing from the sidelines, Juhyun reveals that the disciples have been practicing these straight punches non-stop for the past 4 days. While it may appear to outsiders as simple boxing practice, Juhyun understands that the sword is an extension of the fist, making this training essential. Among the 13 disciples who joined this term, Juhyun demands only one thing: they must hit the same spot 100 times with each punch. For a typical prodigy, this mastery usually takes a month, and for slower learners, it could take several months to achieve. Yet, Sinha Hyen accomplishes this remarkable feat within just 4 days, completely astonishing Juhyun. The other disciples are equally shocked at Sinha Hyen's rapid learning, unable to hide their surprise. Soa, feeling envious of her younger brother's extraordinary talent, pushes herself harder to maintain her own goal of becoming the Namgung clan's head. With a satisfied smile, Juhyun feels assured that the Namgung clan is truly blessed to have Sinha Hyen among them. After a while, he tells the disciples to stop, explaining they've practiced enough and will repeat the training each morning. He then announces they will start sword training, which causes the disciples to light up with excitement. Juhyun asks if the disciples are familiar with the 3 talents sword technique, and they all affirm their knowledge. However, Sinha Hyen raises his hand, prompting Juhyun to question if there is an issue. Sinha Hyen explains that he has never held a sword before, leaving everyone in utter disbelief. Still astonished, Juhyun points out that the 3 talents sword technique is typically the first thing taught in martial arts. Sinha Hyen admits he never learned any martial arts basics, let alone sword techniques, which further shocks the group. Juhyun reassures Sinha Hyen that it is not an issue and decides all disciples will begin training in the 3 talents sword technique. Gathering their wooden swords, the disciples watch as Juhyun retrieves his own sword and begins demonstrating the technique. With fluid movements, Juhyun swings his sword swiftly, slicing through the air in an elegant display of precision and mastery. Mesmerized by the graceful movements, the disciples watch in awe, deeply impressed by their instructor's skill. After the demonstration, Juhyun instructs the disciples to memorize the movements for tomorrow's sword training, then ends the lesson. That night, while everyone else is asleep, Sinha Hyen is outside, attempting to replicate Juhyun's sword movements from earlier. Recalling the movements of the beggar kid he once saw, Sinha Hyen notices similarities to Juhyun's techniques. Fixing those movements in his mind, he begins practicing them, moving fluidly and swinging his sword with controlled precision. Successfully performing the 3 talents sword technique, Sinha Hyen also starts practicing the 98 striking techniques. Lifting his sword before his face, he decides to practice both techniques one more time to perfect them. After multiple repetitions, he finally understands that these techniques are built on the same principle as the straight punch. He realizes the 3 talents sword technique and 98 striking techniques are foundational arts meant to master the basics through repetition. When mastered, the 3 talents sword technique serves as the ultimate foundation, making it easier to learn advanced sword techniques. Sinha Hyen continues practicing late into the night, noticing a slight increase in his power, but still feeling as though something is missing. Suddenly, he senses someone behind him and turns to see a stranger who asks how he is doing. Introducing himself as Namgung Min, the stranger smiles warmly and calls Sinha Hyen his little brother. Walking up to Sinha Hyen, Namgung Min mentions their uncle said he would be here and praises his hard work. He observes that Sinha Hyan seems to be practicing the three talents sword technique, which Sinha Hyan confirms. Min notes that based on Sinha Hyan's movements, it seems he has been practicing for a long time and asks if he feels something is missing. He explains that swordsmanship is not just about the sword and the arm wielding it, emphasizing that footwork is equally crucial. Hearing this, Sinha Hyan realizes his mistake, as he had never focused on his footwork while wielding the sword. Offering to demonstrate, Min tells Sinha Hyan to watch carefully. Lifting his wooden sword, Min begins showcasing the three talents sword technique, infusing his inner energy into each move. He performs a vertical slash, followed by a horizontal slash that flows like a raging river, and concludes with thrusts so fast it seems like there are multiple copies of him. Witnessing this astonishing display, Sinha Hyan is left speechless and deeply impressed. Min explains that the final move is called Wind and Rain in 8 directions, a technique involving thrusting the sword in 8 precise directions. He then asks Sinha Hyan if he learned anything from the demonstration, and Sinha Hyan admits he noticed how Min followed the sword's path. Min presses further, but Sinha Hyan confesses he was too focused on the movements to observe anything else. After thinking for a moment, Sinha Hyan concludes that the purpose of footwork is to maintain the body's center of gravity during combat. When Min asks what he means, Sinha Hyan elaborates that maintaining the body's center allows one to display their best swordsmanship. He also adds that he realized the need to carefully balance inner energy and physical strength for optimal results. Min, thoroughly impressed, acknowledges that Sinha Hyan has already grasped the concept of centering the body in swordsmanship. He encourages Sinha Hyan to keep focusing on his center and refining his footwork, as it is fundamental to mastering the sword. With a slight bow, Sinha Hyan thanks Min for his guidance, and the two head back to their respective rooms. The next morning, Namgung Min arrives at the Blue Dragon Pavilion and is greeted warmly by Juhyun, who asks about his well-being. Returning the greeting, Min replies that he is doing well and mentions he returned safely. Juhyun inquires if Min discovered anything, to which Min reveals he found minor traces of the demonic cult. Hearing this, Juhyun is startled, as his suspicions about the cult's activity are confirmed. Currently, the martial world is plagued by sporadic yet violent bloodbaths, primarily targeting smaller sects. Tragically, the Sin family was also a victim of one of these bloodbaths. Reassuring Juhyun, Min states that now that they know the demonic cult is behind it, they can devise countermeasures. Min then mentions that he met Sinha Hyan the previous night and explains how he was practicing the three talents sword technique, astonishing Juhyun. He also highlights Sinha Hyan's incredible comprehension and admits the boy has immense potential. Noticing Juhyun's shock, Min asks if there's a problem, and Juhyun reveals it's Sinha Hyan's first time holding a sword. Min, puzzled, asks Juhyun to clarify what he means. Juhyun recounts Sinha Hyan's feats, including acing the entrance exam, memorizing the infinite steps, and defeating Hwan in a sparring match. Hearing this, Min is stunned and takes a few moments to process the information. Smiling slightly, Min remarks that perhaps it's time for him to relinquish the title of once-in-a-millennium talent. Juhyun responds that for ordinary people, Min still holds the title of once-in-a-millennium talent. Min resolves to redouble his training efforts, which he had been neglecting, so he won't lag behind his younger brother, Sinha Hyan. Min admits he had lost his competitive drive, as there was no one among the younger generation who could challenge him. Reflecting on his past, Min recalls how, at 15, he defeated all young warriors at the Blue Dragon Pavilion, extinguishing his fighting spirit. Now, seeing the fire of competition rekindled in Min's eyes, Juhyun feels a sense of satisfaction. At that moment, Soa arrives, and upon noticing Min, she exclaims excitedly. Rushing toward him in delight, she hugs Min tightly and asks why he didn't visit her sooner. Patting Soa's head affectionately, Min explains that he arrived late the previous night and didn't have the chance. Sinha Hyan soon joins them, bowing respectfully to greet Min and wishing him a good morning. With a small laugh, Min acknowledges Sinha Hyan's greeting and then departs. Juhyun, still smiling, feels optimistic, sensing that a new era is dawning for the Namgung clan. Quite some time has passed since Sinha Hyan entered the Blue Dragon Pavilion, and he has dedicated every moment to relentless training. Sinha Hyan thought wielding a sword would feel different, but he started to miss the straightforward punches. The current training involves repeatedly slashing the same spot with a sword, which seems simple but requires immense precision and focus. It isn't just Sinha Hyan struggling, all the disciples are finding this technique exceedingly difficult. Despite being fully concentrated, each of Sinha Hyan's slashes deviates slightly, just half a fingernail's width from perfection. With a deep breath and sharper focus, Sinha Hyan finally manages to align his slashes more accurately than before. Watching Sinha Hyan, Juhyun smiles with pride, sensing he might become the youngest to skip straight to a grade. The Blue Dragon Pavilion classifies its martial artists into 3 primary ranks based on skill and progress. The first rank consists of trainees who focus on cultivating their bodies and dantian before delving into martial arts. The second rank includes Blue Dragon Pavilion members who are officially recognized as part of the clan and begin learning family martial techniques. Lastly, the elite members represent the Namgung clan in the martial world, manage key affairs, and may receive the Namgung surname. There's no set timeframe for advancing through these ranks, as promotions depend solely on individual skill and merit. Min, for instance, advanced to Blue Dragon member status within 2 years and became an elite member in just 1 additional year. As Juhyun reflects, Sinha Hyan approaches and announces he has already learned the Changung Daein technique, stunning Juhyun. Juhyun knows that mastering Changung Daein is a feat even Blue Dragon members struggle with, making Sinha Hyan's progress astonishing. Noticing Sinha Hyan's exceptional focus, Juhyun dismisses the disciples after a while, instructing them to return tomorrow for more training. Relieved that training is over, Soa approaches Sinha Hyan and suggests they head back together. On their way, Soa asks Sinha Hyan if he truly trains even at night and wonders how he doesn't find non-stop training unbearably dull. Sinha Hyan admits that it's undeniably boring, surprising Soa, who hadn't expected such a blunt answer. He explains that their master emphasized the importance of mastering the basics, which is why he dedicates himself to rigorous training. Soa asks if this dedication means he would blindly follow their master's instructions, even if it cost him his life. Sinha Hyan calmly responds that if it would help him improve his martial skills, he wouldn't hesitate to try, leaving Soa utterly shocked. Watching his innocent smile as he says such extreme things makes Soa question how far he's willing to go. She asks if Sinha Hyan plans to train in the courtyard again tonight, and he replies that he probably will. Soa suggests that instead of confining himself to the courtyard, he should explore more of the training grounds. Her surprise grows even further when Sinha Hyan admits he has only been moving between the hall and training ground since his arrival. Determined to match his dedication, Soa declares that she will train alongside Sinha Hyan from now on to shake off her laziness. Though initially overwhelmed by his intense regimen, Soa gradually begins to enjoy the rigorous training after a week of perseverance. However, she notices that the gap between her improvement and Sinha Hyan's is enormous, like comparing a single drop of water to an endless ocean. Sinha Hyan, meanwhile, continues to focus entirely on replicating Min's demonstration of the 3 talents sword technique. After much practice and thought, Sinha Hyan finally realizes that slashing isn't merely about swinging the sword with force. Instead of forcing out his inner energy, he lets the sword flow naturally with the wind, allowing the energy to release with effortless grace. He cuts through the air, each slash carrying the elegance of a gentle breeze, refining his movements with every swing. Watching this, Soa is utterly stunned, unable to believe what she's witnessing. Sinha Hyan then attempts the final move, wind in 8 directions, thrusting his sword into 8 directions with lightning-fast precision. Soa stands frozen, completely shaken by the unparalleled skill on display. Suddenly, Sinha Hyan feels his strength leaving him, realizing he has reached his limit, and collapses onto the ground to rest. Soa immediately asks what technique he just performed, and Sinha Hyan casually replies that it was the 3 talents sword technique. Soa, unconvinced, retorts that it couldn't possibly be the same technique they learned. Frustrated by how far behind she feels, Soa shouts that it's unfair, fuming as she storms away. As she leaves, she angrily declares that during training, Sinha Hyan should avoid speaking to her because she refuses to fall behind him. Time flows steadily, and Juhyun, who once believed this year's disciples were inferior to past batches, now watches in astonishment as they develop at an incredible pace. Among them, Juhyun feels certain that Sinha Hyan is the driving force, inspiring and influencing the others through his unmatched dedication. This sight reminds Juhyun of Min, who, at Sinha Hyan's age, stood like a dragon towering above his peers in talent and ability. Sinha Hyan approaches Juhyun, bows, and declares he needs a break, admitting he can't push himself further. The other disciples are utterly shocked by this, as they had thought Sinha Hyan was an unyielding force. They question him, asking why he's resting already and accusing him of thinking himself superior, believing he wants special treatment. Calmly and without hesitation, Sinha Hyan denies their accusations, simply replying that he wishes to rest because he truly needs it. Juhyun observes that, despite being the youngest among them, Sinha Hyan has become a leader whom the others look up to like an elder brother. For a fleeting moment, Juhyun even entertains the idea that perhaps this group might all rise together to become official members. Gathering the disciples, Juhyun announces the conclusion of their training for the day, praising them for the rapid progress they have achieved. To their delight, he reveals that starting tomorrow, they will begin learning a brand new sword technique. However, their initial joy fades quickly as they realize the new technique will undoubtedly demand even greater effort and resilience. With a curious expression, Soa raises her hand and boldly asks Ju-hyun to reveal what the sword technique entails. Ju-hyun answers that it is none other than the Changung sword technique. Xianhong asks if this technique is the Namgung clan's revered secret martial art. Confirming their speculation, Ju-hyun nods and further states that they will also be learning the complementary Changung Mind technique. He explains that he requested the clan head to advance the timeline for teaching these secrets, and the request was approved. With this announcement, Ju-hyun declares that every disciple now holds the potential to be promoted to official member status, then dismisses them. In martial arts, true improvement in sword techniques doesn't come from mere effort alone, no matter how rigorous it may be. It is a test of raw talent, a rare quality that sets apart those destined for greatness from the rest. Whether it's in mastering the movements of a sword or understanding the deep principles of swordsmanship, talent reigns supreme. Yet, one more element is crucial, one often overlooked, and that is an unyielding obsession with perfection. After a month of learning the Changung sword technique, clear differences begin to emerge between Soa, Sinha Hyan, and Peng Xianhong from the northern Peng family. When Ju-hyun first encountered Xianhong, he was taken aback. Rumors had circulated that Peng Ji-san, Xianhong's father, doted on him excessively, sparing no expense on martial arts training and rare elixirs. Ju-hyun now confirms those rumors as truth, recognizing that Xianhong's talent. However, Xianhong's attention remains fixed on Sinha Hyan, as he watches him absorb every lesson effortlessly, like water flowing into parched earth. To Xianhong, it seems as though Sinha Hyan was born with an innate understanding of the Changung sword technique. Standing before Sinha Hyan, Xianhong feels a pang of inadequacy, recalling his father's words that he would someday grow to be the strongest. But now, Xianhong realizes the world of the Namgung clan is far vaster and filled with talents greater. As the training concludes, Ju-hyun commends the disciples, acknowledging their visible improvement with each passing day. Pointing out their progress, he mentions some disciples are showing the basics of the Changung sword technique, then announces he has an important message. Late that night, in the disciples' quarters of the Blue Dragon Pavilion, Sinha Hyan quietly channels his inner energy in deep concentration. He feels the surge of power within him, realizing his stamina has grown exponentially. He recalls Ju-hyun's statement that any disciple with outstanding achievements can take the promotion test. Unbeknownst to Sinha Hyan, he has become the center of attention and the embodiment of hope within the Namgung clan. Whispers spread, comparing him to Min, with some even boldly claiming that Sinha Hyan has already surpassed him in potential. Determined not to let down those who believe in him, Sinha Hyan resolves to pass the promotion test no matter what it takes. Instead of resting, he steps into the tranquil Blue Dragon Pavilion training ground under the cover of darkness. As he pushes open the large gates, faint voices reach his ears, revealing the presence of others within the grounds. He discovers Xianhong speaking with Ju-hyun, boldly declaring his desire to take the promotion test as soon as possible. Ju-hyun calmly responds that Xianhong will have his opportunity when the time is right, asking why he is so eager. Xianhong hesitantly inquires about Sinha Hyan's standing, and Ju-hyun admits that Sinha Hyan is currently on a higher level and will be tested first. Frustrated, Xianhong retorts that, while Sinha Hyan is indeed skilled, he cannot possibly be the strongest among them all. Ju-hyun, recognizing the jealousy in Xianhong's words, doesn't chastise him, understanding it stems from the boy's fiery passion. Seizing the moment, Ju-hyun summons Sinha Hyan and declares a sparring match between him and Xianhong to determine who truly stands superior. The martial artists of the Northern Peng family hold a perspective distinct from ordinary righteous sect martial artists, shaped by their unique traditions. This is because the Peng family adheres to the rule of the strong, where the strongest within the family becomes the next clan head. Though Sinha Hyan tries to remain hidden, Ju-hyun confidently calls out, claiming he knows he is there, and Sinha Hyan steps into view. Ju-hyun observes Sinha Hyan's uneasy expression and assumes he must have overheard the earlier conversation. Sinha Hyan faces Xianhong, and Ju-hyun remarks that martial artists need a strong fighting will, so he doesn't mind Xianhong's attitude. Ju-hyun emphasizes that they are martial artists and says the simplest way to determine strength is through sparring. He makes it clear that this will not be a casual match but a proper sparring session, and it will take place immediately. With Ju-hyun's order, both Xianhong and Sinha Hyan take their positions, standing firm with their wooden swords ready. Focused entirely on Sinha Hyan, Xianhong acknowledges his exceptional skill but resolves to do whatever it takes to win. Clapping his hands decisively, Ju-hyun signals the start of the sparring session. Without wasting a single moment, Xianhong charges towards Sinha Hyan, who braces himself to counter. Xianhong swings his wooden sword with force, but Sinha Hyan quickly blocks it. Ju-hyun, watching closely, exclaims that Sinha Hyan's defensive response was exactly as he expected from him. Xianhong strikes again, this time with even greater power, and Sinha Hyan barely manages to block the attack. As the match continues, Ju-hyun wonders how many elixirs Xianhong received, recalling the Peng family master's favor. Despite Xianhong's relentless strikes, he grows increasingly surprised that Sinha Hyan hasn't faltered in terms of strength. While this is Sinha Hyan's first formal sparring match, he has fought others before, and as he battles Xianhong, he realizes that Xianhong is skilled but not on the level of Min. Sinha Hyan swings his sword with precision, nearly landing a hit on Xianhong, who blocks it at the very last second. Taking a step back, Xianhong notes that the attack was dangerously close. Sinha Hyan reflects on his countless mental sparring sessions against Min, realizing that those experiences have prepared him well for moments like this. Observing Xianhong's superior inner energy, Sinha Hyan quickly concludes that clashing head-on would not be a wise choice. Determined to turn the tide, Sinha Hyan charges forward just as Xianhong counters with his own aggressive move. Their eyes lock in as they swing their swords, and suddenly one of the wooden swords snaps and falls to the ground. When the dust clears, Sinha Hyan's sword is intact, pointed at Xianhong's face as he sits stunned on the ground. Xianhong, completely taken aback, struggles to process his unexpected defeat. Seeing Sinha Hyan exhausted, Xianhong realizes he used all his inner energy for the final strike. Extending his hand, Sinha Hyan reaches out to Xianhong and calmly asks if he is alright. After a moment of silence, Xianhong smiles, accepting his defeat gracefully and acknowledging Sinha Hyan's superior skill. Taking Sinha Hyan's hand, Xianhong rises to his feet and openly admits his loss. Reflecting on the match, Xianhong realizes how arrogant he had been and vows to train harder. Ju-hyun, clearly impressed, smiles and declares that it was an excellent match. He instructs Sinha Hyan to rest, announcing that the long day tomorrow will include Sinha Hyan's promotion test, which has been moved up. Meanwhile, at the Gaebong-Murim Alliance, Muriong sits at his desk, immersed in his work. Suddenly, someone enters the room, calling out to Muriong. It is the old beggar elder, who immediately questions why Muriong has stayed in the gloomy Murim Alliance for the past 3 months. The elder mentions the clan exterminations targeting small sects and families, pointing to the demonic cult as the likely culprit. He notes 2 peculiar commonalities in the destroyed sects and estates, hinting at a deeper connection. The first is that, 15 to 20 years ago, an outsider came to settle in each of these areas, leaving a subtle but significant trace. Muriong inquires if the elder is referring to people like Sin Ji-hyak of the Sin family, seeking clarification. The elder confirms and adds that each estate had a room or storage area that was spotlessly clean, devoid of any dust, which seemed unusual. He remarks that these pristine rooms are undoubtedly important clues, though their exact purpose remains a mystery to them. Changing the subject, the elder informs Muriong that his grandson, Sinha Hyan, is set to take the promotion test tomorrow. Startled by this revelation, Muriong asks if it is true, and the elder, with a mischievous smirk, assures him that he never lies about such matters. Hearing this, Muriong declares that he must hurry back to his sect immediately and instructs the elder to handle things at the Murim Alliance, much to the elder's displeasure. Namgung Jaehyun of the Namgung clan walks into the room, declaring that he is ready to return back to the Namgung clan. His gaze then falls on the beggar elder, and he greets him warmly, acknowledging his presence. The elder smiles, mentioning Jaehyun will meet the boy, and affirms when Jaehyun asks if it's Sinha Hyan. Jaehyun claims he's heard Sinha Hyan defeated Hwan in the entrance exam and is an unparalleled prodigy, even comparable to Min. Seeing the wide grin on Jaehyun's face, the elder reminds him that his son Min has the spitting image of him. Muriong then suggests that they should head back to their home. Back in the Namgung clan, Ju-hyun and Cheol bring Sinha Hyan to his exam, standing before a small, towering steel structure. Ju-hyun points out that this sturdy-looking tower is made from the finest steel. Cheol offers Sinha Hyan a sword, and taking it in his hands, Sinha Hyan exclaims that this sword is well-forged. Ju-hyun tells Sinha Hyan that if he passes the test and becomes a member, he will be able to keep that sword. As for the test, Ju-hyun holds up 3 fingers and tells Sinha Hyan to bring down the tower in just 3 strikes without breaking the sword. Sinha Hyan asks if he can touch the tower, and Ju-hyun grants him the permission. So, Sinha Hyan begins running his hand along the surface of the tower, carefully trying to understand and feel it better. He notes that this tower is solid and precise, and also realizes that with his current inner energy, he cannot topple it on his own. Placing his palm on the tower, Sinha Hyan begins feeling the chi flowing from where the ingots meet, sensing its subtle power. This means that though the tower appears to be one solid piece, it is actually not, with many gaps wherever the ingots meet. Understanding this weakness of the tower, Sinha Hyan reaches for his sword with determination. Ju-hyun and Cheol notice that Sinha Hyan is using some kind of sword-drawing technique. Normally, examinees use inner energy to push the sword against the tower with force, but the sword-drawing technique prioritizes speed and precision over weight. As Cheol notes, Sinha-Hyen's stance undermines the test's intent, which is to rely on raw power. Meanwhile, Sinha-Hyen takes in deep, steady breaths, calming himself as his inner energy begins flowing out from him. Aiming for the space between the ingots, Sinha-Hyen focuses intently, channeling his chi precisely into that gap. He closes his eyes and recalls how he had been training up to this point, all the preparation to be able to cut exactly where he wants. Pulling out the sword, he thrusts it forward with incredible speed, striking the tower at one specific point. Instantly, the tower begins shaking violently, and as Juhyun and Cheol watch in awe, the tower crumbles to the ground, destroyed in one swift blow. Seeing this, Juhyun is completely taken aback. However, Sinha-Hyen calmly states that he failed, raising his sword and pointing to the top of it, where it has been slightly dented. With a laugh, Juhyun points out that he said the sword shouldn't break, but it can get damaged. Sinha-Hyen is surprised to hear this, but Juhyun declares that he has passed and is now an official member of the esteemed Blue Dragon Pavilion. Juhyun then instructs Sinha-Hyen to go to the blacksmith to get the chipped part of the sword fixed. Looking down at the crumbled tower, Cheol admits that Sinha-Hyen is truly remarkable, claiming that no one has ever managed to topple the tower like this before. Juhyun claims that he has seen someone do this to the tower before, and says it was the clan head who performed this feat long ago. Looking shocked, Cheol asks Juhyun why he didn't mention it before, surprised by this revelation. Juhyun calmly replies that the clan had told him not to say anything, but mentioned that anyone who topples the tower would become his direct disciple. Cheol asks if that's the reason why the clan head didn't take Min as his disciple, to which Juhyun affirms. So this means, as Juhyun points out, the clan head will finally take on a disciple, and it will be none other than Sinha-Hyen. Cheol recalls Sinha-Hyen's mom and vows that the clan will avenge her. Sinha-Hyen is practicing with the sword he just received from passing the test. Swinging the sword once more, Sinha-Hyen looks pleased as it fits him perfectly. Last time when he had gone to get his previous sword fixed, the blacksmith had recommended him a different sword to fit his style. Lifting the sword before his face, Sinha-Hyen hopes he can get used to it soon. It's been a week since Sinha-Hyen was promoted to a formal member, and usually, a master would be assigned within days of promotion and training would begin. But in Sinha-Hyen's case, none of these have happened to him as he was told to wait for his master. So while waiting for that day, Sinha-Hyen is just doing what he does best. He is fighting in an imaginary duel with a warrior he creates in his own mind. Since the duel with Brother Pung, Sinha-Hyen's imaginary warrior has become more refined. Sinha-Hyen and his imaginary person continue exchanging sword slashes 10 times, 20 times, when finally Sinha-Hyen manages to land a hit. At that moment, someone arrives there, clapping their hands and praising Sinha-Hyen for his skills. It's Hwan standing over there with a wide smile as he asks if he interrupted Sinha-Hyen. Sinha-Hyen assures him he didn't and claims he was actually thinking of visiting Hwan. Hwan congratulates Sinha-Hyen for being a formal member and reveals that when he took the test, he failed twice, as Sinha-Hyen says he got lucky. Hwan notes that luck is important too but points out that Sinha-Hyen didn't pass just because of luck. With a smile, Sinha-Hyen thanks Hwan for his compliment. Hwan asks Sinha-Hyen if he was sparring alone, and Sinha-Hyen confirms he was, so Hwan suggests he try sparring with him in exchange. Since he hasn't brought his sword, Sinha-Hyen says they should do a simple duel like they did in the Blue Dragon Pavilion entrance exam. Deciding to see how fast he can win, Sinha-Hyen agrees to Hwan's suggestion. Stretching his arms, Hwan clenches his fist and getting up in an offensive position dares Sinha-Hyen to get ready. And then he starts the footwork and begins approaching Sinha-Hyen as Sinha-Hyen notices the infinite steps Hwan is doing are much faster than before. As Hwan thrusts his palm forwards, Sinha-Hyen quickly moves aside and dodges it. Hwan once again thrusts his other hand, and this time it lands, which Sinha-Hyen blocks with his arms. Hwan claims that he put a lot of force into that attack, but didn't even manage to make Sinha-Hyen flinch and praises his strength. With a smirk, Hwan asks Sinha-Hyen if he is already trying to beat him and teasingly calls him shameless. Saying he has been training for 5 years, Hwan charges at Sinha-Hyen. Sinha-Hyen raises his hands to defend himself and thrusts an arm forwards to counter Hwan's attack. Hwan is surprised that Sinha-Hyen managed to stop his attack and realizes Sinha-Hyen is not far behind him in an inner energy battle. Hwan then pushes Sinha-Hyen backwards, causing Sinha-Hyen to fall back to the ground. But Sinha-Hyen applies inner energy into his leg and stops himself from crashing to the ground. Nervously, Sinha-Hyen says he hasn't fallen yet, but Hwan points out that Sinha-Hyen cheated. Sinha-Hyen defends his actions, saying there were no rules against it and that using terrain and situation is crucial for a martial artist. Laughing loudly, Hwan praises Sinha-Hyen's cleverness and then sits down on the ground feeling tired. He claims that he has been training like crazy for months and found the training doesn't suit him. Sinha-Hyen points out that Hwan's progress over these months is very noticeable. Juan admits he is indeed good but then says when he sees Min, he feels like nobody and compares Min to a star. Juan then states that he will give up on becoming the head of the Namgung clan now and tells Sinha Hyan to work hard. As Juan prepares to leave, Sinha Hyan says he doesn't care about becoming clan head and just wants to train as an ordinary martial artist with him. Juan stops, turns around, and strokes Sinha Hyan's head, telling him to go inside since it's too late. So Sinha Hyan leaves the place for his dorm, and Juan stands there silently, thinking about the fact that he just got comforted by his younger brother.